This all happened at my son Caleb's 5th birthday party. The first real one I'd been able to give him. Everything had to be perfect. My poor boy had suffered through 4 birthdays without any real celebration. Or his father. 3 months ago, I'd finally left my job as a waitress after being offered a new one as a teacher's aide in Caleb's class. The pay wasn't that much better, but there were benefits, namely spending time with my son and his friends, a key component in the planning of this party. It was the first time he had real friends, and they were all he truly needed for the party. It was his first, though, and I was through seeing that dejected look in his eyes every time he got a year older. As I said, everything had to be as perfect as possible. Part of that had already been accomplished after giving him his present earlier on that day. After a year of hounding me for a tablet, I was finally able to afford at least a leap pad. It wasn't exactly what he wanted, but his face lit up just the same. All that remained now was putting the finishing touches on Caleb's cake, arrange the presents, and wait for the entertainment to arrive. And as far as this was concerned, again, my budget was limited, so all I could afford was a Craigslist clown named Baldo. A completely asinine handle in my opinion, but hopefully he would be enough to keep them occupied for an hour or so. I was sure the other children's parents would appreciate some activity other than devouring confectionery sweets and just being unbridled boys in my backyard. Just as I was spelling out B on the cake, there was the sound of a deafening engine that puttered to a stop in front of my house. Baldo must have arrived. Walking towards the front door to greet him, I was pleasantly surprised to notice that he was early. Startled again when I opened the door to see a brightly colored, beat-up Geo, but no clown in sight. I made my way toward the backyard, and there was Caleb and all 10 of his guests sitting attentively in front of the oversized shoes of the clown. There were 3 black duffel bags full of tricks in front of them, and he obnoxiously introduced himself to us as Percival J. Puffinstuff. A much cleverer name than Baldo, I had to admit, but there was something off about him. No one could deny that he had plenty of energy, but it seemed far more manic than any clown I'd seen before. Worst of all was his makeup. He looked like a fry cook who'd been called in at the last minute to dress as Ronald McDonald for the opening of some new location. However, this really did not bother me since he was cheap and seemed to have all 11 children eating out of the palm of his hand, giving me the freedom to return to the kitchen. I began sticking 5 tiny candles in the cake, half paying attention to the fairly standard routine Percival was going through. The kids didn't seem to mind, though, hearing intermittent gasps and explosions of cheers. While arranging the presents around the finished cake, I could not help but feel extremely proud of myself. I'd orchestrated a fantastic party on an extremely fixed income, and most important, I'd done it all by myself. That was when the phone rang, bursting my momentarily ballooned ego. It was the police. I figured the nosy widow from next door must have called in a noise complaint. Just as I was getting ready to apologize, the voice on the phone urgently asked if I had paid for the services of Baldo the Clown this afternoon. Confused, I responded that he was in my backyard as we spoke. The voice was silent for a moment, then told me that a stripped, headless body was found near his place of residence, and that Percival Pickard, a recently escaped inmate from a local institute for the criminally insane, was the prime suspect. My stomach plummeted as I stared out the window, stricken with horror as I noticed that the clown was staring right back at me. I bolted towards the door, but it was too late. Before reaching the handle, he was out of sight. I ran into the yard to make sure all the children were safe and accounted for, as I heard the junkie Geo's engine belch as the lunatic sped off. After sending the children inside and calming myself as much as possible, I looked over at the duffel bags the phony clown had left behind. 2 of them were unzipped, filled with colorful clown's accoutrements. The 3rd was fully zipped, and I could not quell my curiosity before the police arrived. I crouched down and began to unzip the bag, noticing too late the thick liquid that it was drenched in. Jumping back, I realized in horror that it was blood. And through the partially unzipped bag, I saw the unmistakable, severed, balding head of deceased Baldo the Clown.